Good afternoon. I'm Matt Driskill, editor of Asian Aviation Magazine and AsianAviation.com. Welcome to the latest In Conversation, sponsored by Metrojet of Hong Kong. Got to pay the bills there. Today we're speaking with Nicolas Ang. He's the co-founder and CEO of FDRONES here in Singapore. Nicolas, welcome to In Conversation. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
You bet. First, tell us about FDRONES. I think you, and tell us who your co-founder was. I think you guys started this in 2019, and you're not delivering pizzas or coffee or Amazon packages or anything. What's interesting to me is you've carved out a real niche targeting the marine sector, ship-to-shore deliveries. Give us the quick tour of the company.
Sure. So I met my co-founder Yeshwant in 2019 through this program called Entrepreneur First. So he's been building drones for more than 6 years, and I've actually been working for the Singapore government, bringing foreign investments into Singapore across various sectors, including aerospace and marine and offshore. So it's been almost 2 years now since we've started FDRONES. Our vision is a world where maritime logistics are more efficient and sustainable, with the large-scale drones which we are developing, which would ultimately deliver 100-kilogram payloads over 100 kilometers. So as a very young and lean startup, I'm proud that we have made several achievements, including being the first company in the world to provide 24-hour commercial beyond visual line of sight drone deliveries. And our focus right now is in enabling drone deliveries to ships and offshore platforms, because the traditional means of using boats and helicopters are really expensive, inefficient, and carbon intensive.
Okay. Again, I'm interested in the sector because I have my doubts. I've talked to people like Honeywell and others that are in Honeywell just set up a new drone division, UAV division, I guess. And I have my doubts about pizza deliveries and things like that, because that is going to require a whole new infrastructure to be developed. Let's talk about COVID-19 a little bit. The drone sector's hot. It's one part of the aerospace industry that seems to have survived the pandemic better than most. Has COVID affected you guys? Has it slowed down development at all?
I would say it has slowed down a little bit, but at the same time, it has also supported us in several ways. When COVID first hit, it severely disrupted our fundraising, prototyping, and test flight activities. We are now still in a way playing a bit of a catch up to make back some of the months that we've lost. But on the other hand, COVID has also shown the world how useful drones can be in a pandemic like this. Drones have been put into use, like monitoring of lockdowns, deliveries of vaccines and essential supplies, and so on. So with many borders still closed or tightly controlled, drones have also become an attractive tool to send items between ships and the ports they call on. So back in June last year, when Singapore had a lockdown, we also helped the Singapore's Maritime and Port Authority to contactlessly deliver essential items to crews which were then stuck on board vessels.
Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned your fundraising and things like that. Back in February, you announced the company was successful raising seed capital from some pretty serious players in the industry, along with some angel investors here in Singapore. I'm interested in that, and let's talk about your investors. And also for the drone industry in general, at least on the commercial side of things, I mean, is there a lot of cash around, or is there a lot of investor interest?
Oh, we really wish there's a lot of cash around. I think it's been really after much perseverance and persistence that we've now closed our seed round with marquee players like Eastern Pacific Shipping, which is a world-leading ship management company committed to green and technology-driven growth, and Schulte Group, a reputed ship owner and manager with over 135 years of experience. In general, I would say that investors have become a lot more stringent, given that the pandemic has tightened cash flows and increased market volatility across most sectors. But investors are still on the lookout for opportunities, and companies and startups which have proven themselves to be robust can survive the pandemic and could potentially emerge much stronger. So we happen to sit on the right side of the equation, and we're very happy to have closed our round at, with more money than we had actually intended.
And how long will that carry you? Are you going to be looking to do a Series B or another fundraising round in a couple of years or a year or so?
Yeah, so this was a seed round. It would last us 18 to 24 months, and we will certainly be looking out to raise an A round when the time comes.
And hopefully take the company public and make $1 gazillion.
Hopefully in a couple of years.
Let's talk about the market overall. Singapore is interesting. There seems to be a lot of activity with UAVs, drones. Pick your acronym whatever acronym you want to use. China also is pretty big. How big of a market are you looking at? I mean, you're in a special niche, but how big is that niche?
Well, the global market for drones is estimated to be worth $20 billion by 2027. And while China is home to exciting drone companies like DJI and EHang, but I would say that the opportunities and investor interest is a lot more global now, not just China, not just the US. And we've already seen quite a bit of action in this year. Well, with Wingcopter starting in January, raising $22 million to Drone Deploy's a $50 million Series E round, and German air taxi startup Lilium looking at a potential $3.3 billion SPAC listing. Well, SPAC is like the thing now.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge market. And I'm interested in Singapore, about the industry here and the sort of the environment. Volocopter a while ago did a big test here. Is there something about Singapore that makes the city, the state friendly, drone friendly? I mean, is the government drone friendly in terms of regulations?
They are in a way drone friendly, but at the same time also very stringent and conservative in terms of the regulatory environment. I think what's interesting is that our unique and challenging environment could mean that any drone solution that could work here in Singapore would also have a good likelihood of succeeding elsewhere. Think about a highly urbanized city with 50 smaller islands and 5 airfields squeezed into 700 square kilometers. So drones are still fairly relatively new to many governments, and it is likewise in Singapore. Of course, as a startup, we would want regulatory environments to evolve more quickly, but we also recognize that it would take time. So I think Singapore is moving in the right direction at a decent pace. And specific to our focus area, I'm not actually aware if anywhere else in the world has a maritime sandbox for drone activities like in Singapore. And that was actually where we started some of our test flights back in 2019.
I'm curious, I mean, because Singapore and Hong Kong have this competition, it seems like, going on all the time. I've lived in both cities. I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years. I've lived in Singapore now for about 10 years. I'm curious, I mean, would something like what you're developing, obviously Singapore's got a big maritime, big port. Hong Kong's got a big port. You've got places, Jakarta, you've got Manila, the Philippines, obviously Jakarta, Indonesia. Is this something that you're looking to export or use in other areas?
Definitely. Singapore is just one of the first location that we are starting out. And our target market is really the world's busiest ports, including Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and probably places like Rotterdam and Panama. And our focus is very much on port areas, which are increasingly more congested with the use of boats for these supplies between shore and these ships that come into ports. And it is also a focus for us because we want to fly over nothing as much as possible, over waters. And that is, in a way, to your first question, why we think that we would commercialize and operate in more locations faster compared to pizza deliveries.
Yeah, like I said, I have my doubts about pizza deliveries. Nicholas, we need to take a quick break. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Metrojet of Hong Kong. We'll be right back after this.
We're going to have the crown jewels of Asia, and I promise you we're going to have the nicest and busiest business aviation hangar in the region.
And we're back. We're talking with Nicolas Ang, the CEO and co-founder of FDRONES here in Singapore. Let's talk a little bit about technology. Your drones operate beyond line of sight, so you've got GPS involved. Which is interesting to me because if you've ever driven with GPS, it doesn't always go right. If you're following all the directions. I had some friends of mine in France who were using the GPS, and the computer told them to turn left, and they ended up in a field with a bunch of cows. How does that work in a maritime environment? I mean, the GPS coordinates for a ship can't be that. Are they accurate to the meter enough that the drone can land on? How does that? Explain to me how that works.
So GPS is only one of the many sensors that we use for drone navigation. GPS, like you said, only gives us some rough directions of where a particular system is. An average off-the-shelf drone would usually also make use of systems like IMUs, magnetometers, and live video feed to help pilots navigate. The maritime environment is different, and the most challenging part for us is in developing our drones which are able to land autonomously on vessels, which may not be stationary even when they are anchored. So to enable that, we use a combination of other sensors, including computer vision, LiDAR systems, and our secret sauce, which is the control algorithms and machine learning to enable that.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I knew there was more to it because, like you said, you have a ship, even though it's at anchor, it's swinging at the anchor, it's moving around a little bit. I mean, do ships, I mean, they have transponders. I mean, would a transponder be able to, can the drone key on the transponder, or do I not know what I'm talking about?
We use transponder data to roughly identify where the ship is, and to make sure that it is the vessel that we need to get to. But like you said, the vessel can swing 100 meters when they are anchored. And transponder data have a little bit of a lag time of a couple of minutes. So what's important is for us to be able to clearly identify this vessel using computer vision and be able to tell the drone, or in fact the drone can learn itself where is the right spot to land on a vessel.
Okay. And you've done some trials. You've had some prototypes. I think usually, was it 5 kilos or larger than that?
So we have been using an off-the-shelf drone that can only deliver 5 kilos over 5 kilometers.
And that included, you had some night trials. Where do you stand in testing right now?
So we actually use we have been using the commercial off-the-shelf drone so far in actual deliveries. And we were the first in the world to complete a nighttime commercial beyond visual line of sight drone delivery back in November. And since then, we've actually been doing 24/7 commercial drone deliveries. So far, it's only off-the-shelf drone, 5 kilograms over 5 kilometers. But we have now completed more than 100 autonomous test flights with Hyperlaunch, our proprietary drone that can deliver 5 kilograms over 50 kilometers, which is 10 times more than a typical drone. So we are now in the middle of building our 3rd generation Hyperlaunch, and we will be bringing this to market in the middle of this year. So in 2 months' time, we hope to see it flying the ships in Singapore.
Now, is that the Hyperlaunch Heavy?
That's the Hyperlaunch.
Okay, but you're also developing the Hyperlaunch Heavy, which is supposed to be able to carry 100 kilos.
That's correct. So Hyperlaunch is a scaled-down version of the Hyperlaunch Heavy. And Hyperlaunch Heavy is the drone which we are targeting to be able to deliver 100 kilograms over 100 kilometers. As part of all large aircraft developments, we are building smaller versions of the final target so that we can iterate faster and have a lower development cost. And we are planning to build our first Hyperlaunch Heavy in 18 months.
Okay, I'm curious because I'm an older gentleman these days, and I'm about 80, 90 kilos. I'm not going to say which one exactly, but I mean, with the Heavy, 100 kilos, what kind of payload are we talking about here? Is this food? Is this water? Is this spare parts? And I mean, is this going to require multiple flights to a ship?
Well, 100 kilograms really isn't a lot, like you said, but it is what we think would be interesting for our customers. which would otherwise still have to use a whole supply vessel or a helicopter when they just need something smaller. So this could range from small items like documents, bunker samples, spare parts, and larger items like offshore drill bits that goes onto these offshore platforms, gas tanks, and even life rafts. Again, our interest is in providing an alternative which is more efficient and sustainable compared to using boats or helicopters in such situations.
Okay. Let's talk about airspace controls. I know, actually in Singapore, I think they trialed one not too long ago, if I'm not mistaken. And there are different organizations that are working to set up sort of air traffic management for drones. How is Singapore doing in this area, and how do you are you going to be helping someone like Singapore develop these kinds of controls, or is that a separate thing?
It's sort of a separate thing. It's a sort of a technology in itself. Well, I think Singapore is one of the earlier locations to have started the trial of these what we call unmanned traffic management solutions back in 2017, 2018. And several companies were subsequently involved in these trial projects supported by the Aviation Authority, including Airbus, Garuda Robotics, Avatics, and Nova Systems. We were involved in the consortium led by Nova Systems, which, like you said, it actually just concluded last month in March 2021. I would say these airspace control, unmanned traffic management solutions are still very nascent globally and in Singapore, and we are still assessing, the technology readiness and suitability of these solutions to our unique operating environments where Singapore is highly urbanized with tall buildings and a high population density and also a very congested airspace.
Well, and it's curious to me because, and especially if you get into a place like, Jakarta, Manila, a lot of helicopter traffic, it just seems there's a potential there for some real problems if they don't get this sorted out somehow.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think as a first step, most cities, most locations have already segregated their airspace where drones wouldn't be able to fly beyond 400 feet. So that's one step in the right direction as well before these UTM solutions come into play.
Okay. Finally, last question. It's been a quick chat today, but last question. What are you looking forward to this year? Aviation has been hit hard, as I said at the top of the show. Drone development seems to have moved pretty much right along, although you said it had slowed you down a little bit, but you still managed to raise some money and you're going ahead. Is there anything in particular you're looking forward to this year? What's the bright spot ahead for you guys at FDRONES?
I would say I have two things in mind, actually. The first would be to see our proprietary Hyperlaunch start making commercial deliveries and supporting more contactless deliveries to ships. And the second thing I'm really looking forward to is the world recovering from COVID, and we can all travel for business and leisure and also fly our drones in new markets.
Great. Nicolas Ang, co-founder, CEO of FDRONES here in Singapore. Thanks for joining me in conversation.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for spending time with us.